Thus, Princess Anne helped William accomplish what had been planned for 25 years. And the consequences inside Windsor Castle were immediate and so violent that Camilla was reportedly completely stunned, running straight to Charles to demand he rectify the mistake, only to realize that she had absolutely no power to stop it. That's the story we'll be analyzing today, because when you really consider what was said versus what actually happened, the timeline reveals a wound that never healed and a plan executed with absolute precision. Before we dive into the details, remember to subscribe to the Royal Pendulum channel so you don't miss updates on stories like this. What just happened inside Windsor Castle was the moment royal commentators had been waiting 25 years to discuss. Prince William delivered. Driven by years of simmering resentment, he retrieved the official portrait of Princess Diana from its dark storage room where it had been shamefully buried and placed it in its rightful place, next to Queen Elizabeth on the wall of the Queen's Hall. Camilla had absolutely no idea that was going to happen. When she saw it, she was completely stunned. She ran straight to Charles and ordered him to remove it immediately. What Charles did next turned the entire palace upside down. The wound never healed. There was a portrait of Princess Diana that most people had never seen up close, and the story of where that painting has been kept for the past 25 years will send shivers down your spine. The portrait was painted during one of the most glorious periods of Diana's public life. She was at the peak of everything. Her beauty, her warmth, the way she made ordinary people feel cared for and loved in a way no other member of the royal family had ever done before. Those present when Diana first saw the finished portrait recounted that she stood before it for a long time without saying a word. That's how people become silent when something accurately portrays who they are. The portrait was intended to hang in the Grand Ladies' Hall at Windsor Castle, the most sacred ceremonial space in the entire royal residence. A wall was dedicated to the most important women in the history of the British monarchy. Diana never saw the portrait that hung there. She died before that could happen, and after her death, the portrait was quietly removed, wrapped up, and stored in the palace's vault, where it lay in obscurity for more than 2 decades. When Diana died in August 1997, the world publicly and loudly expressed its grief. But inside the palace, something else was happening, something much quieter and uglier. Just hours after Diana's death was confirmed, the first calls from inside the palace were not calls of mourning. Those close to the royal family said that one of the first concerns raised was whether Diana kept any of her crown jewels in Paris. The battle to reclaim the estate had begun even before the British public was informed of their princess's death. And while that was happening, Camilla had already begun to act. Camilla had spent years living as a secret woman, the one Charles secretly visited while married to Diana. The one Diana called the Rottweiler in private because she knew exactly what this woman was up to with her marriage. Now that Diana was gone, Camilla began moving through the rooms of the palace Diana had once called home. She wasn't simply moving in, she was erasing everything. Diana had always kept fresh flowers in the palace spaces where she lived, bouquets she had personally chosen. Camilla ordered them removed and burned. Not replaced, but destroyed. The bedroom where Diana used to sleep, the room where she held her sons and cried alone at night, where she wrote in silence. Camilla ordered that the room be locked permanently. She didn't want to sleep there, but she also wanted to ensure that no one else would ever sleep there again. She wanted to seal it away like something shameful. Diana's personal belongings were packed up and moved elsewhere. Her image began to disappear from the most prominent ceremonial spaces within the royal residences, and the Arch of the Mothers at Windsor, that sacred wall of honor, never bore Diana's portrait. For over 20 years, the most beloved royal woman of modern times was absent from her own family wall simply because one woman felt uncomfortable in her presence. William was only 15 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London. He walked in silence, dressed in his suit, before the whole world, his face completely expressionless. He was a child who knew that his father had been having an affair with another woman for many years. Diana sat down and told him herself. She said there were 3 people in their marriage. She said that was the reason the family fell apart. His younger brother, Harry, knew a different truth. He was watching a televised debate about the monarchy with Diana. When the name Camilla appeared on the screen, he turned to his mother and asked who that was. Diana had to explain this to her youngest son right then and there, completely unprepared. The most devastating things William ever learned about what had happened to his mother came from a letter in 1995, 2 years before her death. Diana had written a letter to her lawyer, Lord Mishkan. In that letter, she said she believed Charles was planning to stage a car accident with brake failure and a serious head injury so that he could continue living his life. She wrote that her husband was planning to cause an accident in her car. She wrote that Camilla was just a pawn and that she was being exploited by that man in every sense of the word. 2 years after writing those words, Diana died in a car accident in a tunnel in Paris. The letter was given to the police after her death, but lay untouched for 6 years before finally reaching Scotland Yard. Eventually, Charles was questioned privately about this at St. James's Palace. William and Harry were unaware of the full contents of the letter for many years. When William finally understood what his mother had written in the last 2 years of her life, and then looked at what had been done to her memory within the palace walls after her death, something within him had become completely numb. It never subsided. He watched Camilla walk through the rooms where his mother had lived. He watched her remove portraits of his mother from the rooms. He watched the ladies' hall stand empty, where Diana should have been. He maintained a perfectly calm demeanor in front of everyone, but anger was gnawing at him from within. At 16, he finally couldn't take it anymore. He pulled a close friend aside and poured out his heart. He said that Camilla clung to his father and never let go for a single moment. He said that was the reason his mother died, because Diana had been driven out of her own family, deprived of protection, pushed out until she had no one left, and finally left completely alone and unprotected in a Paris tunnel in the middle of the night. A 6-year-old boy said those words about the woman who was living in his mother's house, and he carried that burden for 25 years afterward. Another member of this family carried an even deeper wound related to Camilla than William's, and it began long before Diana came along. That person was Princess Anne. Before Camilla married Andrew Parker B.S., Andrew Parker B.S. had a serious romantic relationship with Anne. They were so close that they discussed marriage. The royal family prevented it because Andrew was Catholic and Anne, as a senior member of the Church of England, was not allowed to marry him. She backed down. She had no other choice, and before long, Camilla moved in and Andrew proposed to her. Anne sat in the church for their wedding in 1973 and witnessed it all unfold. The woman who stole the man Anne was supposed to marry then spent the next few decades as his secret mistress, ruining her brother's marriage, causing Diana immense suffering, and finally entering Buckingham Palace. Royal author Penny Junn says Camilla had been terrified of Anne for years, that Anne's cold attitude toward her was incredibly stressful, and that issues from their shared past had never been resolved and never would be. After the 2023 coronation, Anne reportedly confronted Camilla at a private lunch, looking her straight in the eye and bluntly saying, "You're not the queen. She is merely the king's wife." Anne reportedly never bowed to Camilla. She is said to have personally requested permission from Queen Elizabeth to be exempted from that ritual, and the queen granted it. Anne had witnessed Diana's annihilation. She had witnessed the portrait disappear. She had witnessed the walls of the Great Hall of the Ladies empty for 20 years, and she carried within her every memory. Both Anne and William wanted only one thing: to bring Diana to where she belonged, the Grand Hall of the Queens. Then the night arrived, the day the wait was finally over. William had spent years preparing for it, careful meetings with museum administrators about the portrait placement process. He had studied historical records of every previous portrait placement, spanning decades. He ensured every rule of the organization was perfectly followed so that when the restoration took place, no one on earth could legally challenge or reverse it. He had been playing a game of chess for 20 years within his own family, and this was the final move. The night before it happened, William called Anne. The call was brief. They had both been waiting for this moment for a long time, and they both knew it. I was eager to see her face. It was too late. Diana deserved to go home, Anne said. She'll be home tomorrow, William replied. That was it. The call ended. Camilla had no idea what had happened. She had no idea what awaited her. That morning, she had spent 25 years in her music career, believing she had won. She was about to realize just how wrong she had been. The night Diana returned home, William's group had scheduled a performance for Camilla outside London that day. It was a deliberate move to get her out of the building and keep her there until it was all over and irreversible. During her absence, the Queen's Hall at Windsor was closed, allowing only a select few trusted staff members in. These were individuals who had been thoroughly vetted and who understood their role. No information appeared in the official royal diaries. No press releases were prepared. Everything proceeded in absolute silence. In the early evening hours, the portrait of Princess Diana was brought into the Grand Hall of the Ladies. It had been wrapped in protective covering and stored in the palace's vault for over 20 years. The staff handling the portrait that evening moved it with great care. The way you move an object that is damaged and deserves gentle treatment. Princess Anne was present in person. She insisted on personally overseeing the placement of the portrait. She didn't want anyone else to do it. She had waited for this moment for too long. The protective covering was slowly removed, and for the first time in over 2 decades, Diana's portrait was fully revealed inside Windsor Castle, in the room where it always belonged. The frame had been prepared. The placement had been measured and confirmed, and within just 90 minutes of the portrait being delivered to that gallery, Diana's face was hanging on the wall. She was placed right next to the late Queen Elizabeth, 2 women standing side by side. One reigned for 70 years, the other never had the chance to be together, in the very place where they should have been together from the beginning. After it was all over, the room fell silent. Many witnesses said no one spoke for a moment. They just stood there and watched. And then Princess Anne, who had entered that room with 50 years of grief, resentment, and deeply personal memories, whispered something almost to herself. The staff nearby heard it clearly. She said Diana belonged here. She said music always belonged here. It was just the truth being spoken aloud in a room that had been silent for 25 years. Diana was the most beloved member of royalty of her entire generation. She filled stadiums and streets, and the world mourned at her funeral in a way never before seen and never since. Yet, it was her family who kept her portrait in a storage room for over 2 decades because a woman felt her presence was a threat. That woman was sleeping somewhere else across London that night. She had no idea what had just happened. She had no idea the portrait was hanging on the wall. There is something to understand about the fear Camilla felt about that moment. When Camilla finally met William in person for the first time at Clarence House, royal biographer Christopher Anderson reported that she was trembling. She needed a vodka to calm herself before entering the room. She shook at the thought of facing a teenager. Critics believe this was because she knew exactly what she had done to his mother. She knew he knew, and she had no excuse for him. She had feared William since he was 16, but she never imagined he would do this. That the boy who quietly followed behind his mother's coffin would spend the next 25 years silently and methodically building up a single evening where he would return his mother to the wall she always deserved. That evening, Camilla returned from a date outside London. She went to bed in the palace she had spent 25 years reshaping, restructuring, and erasing the mark of another woman. She slept, and in the Great Hall of the Queens, Diana watched from beside the Queen. The next morning, Camilla woke up and walked straight into the worst day she had experienced in decades. She didn't know it yet. On the worst day of her life, Camilla returned to Windsor the next morning, expecting a perfectly normal day. She walked in, heard the news, and reacted instantly, outwardly. She couldn't stay calm. She couldn't handle it quietly. She was frozen with rage. She ordered the portrait taken down immediately. She demanded an urgent meeting with William. She insisted that Charles intervene on her behalf. She demanded a full explanation from every member of the palace staff involved in the restoration of the portrait. All those requests were denied, every single one. For the first time in her royal career, Camilla was utterly powerless in her own home. The woman who had spent 25 years quietly rebuilding the palace around her had just discovered that the palace could be rebuilt back to its original state, and she had no power to stop it. But the denied requests weren't the worst thing that morning. The worst was what happened when she turned to her husband. Charles had spent decades fighting for Camilla. He had battled institutions, the public, the press, and even his own sons to secure her place in the royal family. For 25 years, he was the only person in the world Camilla could ever truly trust to protect her. And now, she stood before him. Humiliated and angry, waiting for him to fix things. He looked at her and said nothing. He let his son decide. He let his sister's actions go completely unchallenged. He didn't make a phone call. He didn't object. He sat there, leaving Diana's portrait hanging on the wall. Those close to the palace said that, in that moment, Camilla understood something she had never faced before. That Charles had made his choice. He had chosen the institution. He had chosen his son. Ultimately, he decided to respect the woman he had treated so badly his entire life. What made Charles's silence even more heartbreaking was its deeper meaning. According to recent reports, he had begged William not to evict Camilla from the house after his death. A man who understood better than anyone the depth of William's resentment and how he had spent years trying to suppress it. Sources close to the family have confirmed that William is still very angry with Camilla for what she did to his mother. One insider bluntly stated that Camilla's betrayal. Charles knew this. He had always known this. Yet when the moment came, he remained silent. It wasn't just a husband failing to protect his wife. It was a king accepting that the punishment he could never prevent had finally arrived. Just as Camilla thought she had witnessed the worst, Princess Anne entered the room. She came, confronted her directly. She looked at the woman who had burned Diana's bouquet, locked her bedroom door, watched her portrait disappear from the wall for 20 years, and said 5 words. That's what Diana deserved. Camilla stood there and listened to those words from the woman she had never been able to persuade, never been able to threaten, and never been able to subdue. What followed was more than just a bad morning. It marked the beginning of a complete and permanent restructuring of Camilla's position within the royal family. She was quietly sidelined from upcoming public events. The royal patronages Diana had built and supported were being reactivated under Catherine's leadership. The charities Diana had devoted herself to were being brought back into prominent positions on William's official schedule. In the 2 weeks following the restoration of the monarchy, Diana's name was mentioned more often in royal press releases than in the previous 2 years combined. This was a clear, institutional, and utterly irreversible signal that the balance of power had shifted and would not return. Within the new royal order, William had harbored deep resentment toward Camilla throughout his adult life. A source close to the matter has made it clear that neither William nor Harry have forgotten Camilla's betrayal of Diana. William is simply more restrained than his younger brother, and so is the way he expresses it. Harry publicly revealed all of this in his 2023 memoir. He confirmed in writing that both he and William had begged their father not to let Camilla marry her. Both brothers shook their father's hand and begged him not to do it. Both called her a cruel stepmother. Both called her an evil person. Harry chose to explode in public. William chose a different path. He chose patience. He chose the institution itself as his weapon. He waited until he had enough power to use it properly before acting. Sources have confirmed that Charles privately asked William not to sideline Camilla after his death. He understood William's feelings. He knew that as soon as William ascended the throne, every aspect of Camilla's public and private royal life would be reviewed, restructured, and entirely decided by a man who had never forgotten what she had done to his mother. The philanthropic activities that Diana was involved in are being revived. The charities she founded out of genuine love and personal dedication are being brought back into prominence under Catherine's name and William's agenda. Diana's name is being mentioned in official palace announcements with unprecedented frequency and profound respect since before her death. Now, in the Hall of the Patriarchs at Windsor, Diana is honored on the wall alongside Queen Elizabeth. The two women who shaped the emotional heart of the modern British monarchy have finally appeared together on the wall to which they always belonged. William was just 15 when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London. That day, he made a promise to himself and waited. He prepared meticulously. He built the legal and institutional foundation so carefully and thoroughly that no one could challenge it once it was complete. He brought in the one person in the entire family with institutional authority to make it happen and maintain it permanently. And then one quiet evening, while Camilla was fast asleep on the other side of London background music, William brought his mother back to the room she always deserved. Diana's portrait hung on that wall and wouldn't be taken down anytime soon. Diana would surely be proud of the man her son had become.